Hi there, and welcome to the Chrysalis Room, where we heal, become, and we thrive. Today's episode is titled. Today's episode is titled Unlearning Dysfunction, the Generational Detox, because we all need a generational detox, okay? If you, again, are like me, and if you are here continuing to, support the Chrysalis Room with your views, learning more about yourself, how you are the way you are, why you are the way you are, why do you respond that you do, not only emotionally, but physiologically as well. And we have been helpful for you, and you have been in survival mode for so long. We need to unlearn dysfunction, okay? We need a generational detox. Are you with me? It's okay. Because listen. I ain't letting nobody come in the way of my healing, including myself, okay? So, this is what I need you to know. Now I'm getting to the introduction. Official. So every family, guys, passes down more than just genetics. I think some of us are aware of that already. Families pass down more than just genetics and things that are hereditary. Okay? We, inherit our families' mindsets, their money habits, their coping styles, parenting styles, and also their silence. They teach us that silence. And these things that I just described, they're also known as intergenerational patterns. So intergenerational patterns are quietly passed down through generations of families until somebody says it stopped when it met me. Okay, it saw me and it stopped. Somebody, one person. That's all it takes to stop the patterns. And in my generation, it was I. It was me. Thank you. And my siblings, you're welcome. Woo, because it was not an easy journey. But yes, so this episode, let me get comfortable, y'all, because I like to be comfortable. I talk about some heavy stuff, healing stuff, right? And I like to be comfortable. I deserve to be comfortable. I've earned being comfortable. All right. So I encourage you to get comfortable too. If you got some tea, you know what I'm saying? I got a little mug here, but it's just a little prop for now. Get some tea, get you a drink, or whatever. Get comfortable, get cozy. So let's talk about unlearning dysfunction and detoxing from generational patterns. All right. So this episode, I'm going to get into our generational programming. I'm going to talk about some common family patterns. I'm going to talk about how to identify some of these patterns, how we can detox from these patterns, and the behavioral science behind it. And lastly, right, we're going to have some reflections and some things to practice, to work on, we're going to have some applications of all this. All right. So the first thing, let's talk about generational programming, guys. So the first thing we're going to talk about more specifically is what is generational programming. And generational programming is how families model stress, responses to stress, money, love, and conflict. Okay, generational patterns are how families model responses to stress, money, love, and conflict. Okay. These are responses that are passed down generation after generation after generation after generation in silence. They don't have to say this to us. They show us these responses, and it's how they continue to get passed down. All right. So, the study of epigenetics is one that explores how environmental factors and lived experiences influence when and how genes are turned off and on without changing the DNA of a person. So, for example, right, epigenetics can show within an individual how the trauma can alter the gene expression. Okay. So what I am going to say is I want to talk a little bit about heredity. For example, me, which is something I wrote about in my book as well, and it was a big part of my healing journey. Me being an African American woman, I am predisposed genetically to high blood pressure, cardiac system problems, heart attacks, things of that nature. More so because my grandmother, she's had strokes, she's had heart issues, she's had blood clots. And then some relatives, right, pre-diabetic or passed from diabetes, and just other things. So I am predisposed to certain things, certain health conditions, certain, like, I don't think anybody has 20/20 vision, okay, from that side. So there are certain genes, right? There are certain things that are genetic, right? Everybody's short. Everybody short. But the thing is, right, epigenetics, right? Everybody can have the short gene, but it can change if an individual, like for me, for example, the nourishment and the food and different things of that, like what my children consume, can impact their actual growth, because I believe a significant amount of the relatives on my maternal side are on the smaller end due to poverty and impoverished conditions and things of that nature. I think that's a big part of it. And the one relative who kind of towers over everyone else, that's a female, she was, early on, she was somewhat removed from the family and kind of doing things on her own. So I think that's a big reason why she was a little bit more on a healthier end, taller end, things of that nature. She got to get out a little bit. But anyways, so when it comes to trauma, like I'm talking about hereditary, so passing down the genes, the DNA of a person doesn't change, like eye color, height, all of those things don't really change, right? And what they're predisposed to is still there. Now, certain genes could be turned off or on. So for example, if a parent is impacted with depressive symptoms, right, this can get passed down to the infant as well. And so the infant now can more easily express depressive symptoms or easily go into depressive episodes from certain triggering events, because it is a part of this person's DNA, but it may not be expressed until something in the environment triggers it. just like, same thing, anxiety, or anxiety symptoms is in that person's DNA, but and maybe they get exposed to something that can make them like that, and maybe it doesn't happen. But if it continuously happens, they are more likely to develop, an injury, an anxious injury in their body, where their body responds to everything in an anxious manner. So I feel like that wasn't quite a good example for me that I would like to have put out. But it doesn't have to be that complex. It could be something as simple as, if you can think of things like that happen generationally, like the Holocaust, right? Whole ethnicity of people, they might have higher cortisol levels when it comes to government. That might make them more anxious way more quickly, and hypervigilant in different things. In the African American community, we have certain like studies that were done on our people that give high anxious behavior when it comes to doctors and other medical professionals. That is generational trauma that is passed down. They themselves might not quite understand like why they're uncomfortable going to a doctor's office, but that's where it comes from. It was learned, it was conditioned through the generations and was passed down in silence. Same thing with being labeled. That's another reason why, like, African Americans have, a significant reservation when it comes to getting therapy, getting treatment because of this. And it's not just the stigma. They have a very traumatic experience with medical professionals, and so it is a very real trauma that is passed down from generations. And now, like, some Americans have or are developing a certain response. Think of what happened with COVID. Look at the schools. Look at everybody was impacted. So in some form of fashion, the younger generations are going to be passing down, some form of trauma genetically to their offspring as a result of something so big that impacted the whole world. It's gonna have its consequences for that. I don't really like that example, guys, but I'm gonna push through, and I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get better at this, okay? So I hope the whole point of that was just trying to explain how environmental factors, right, are also genetically passed down through trauma. Genetically, our body keeps score. Trauma is also passed down and inherited. Now, whether it's expressed or not in the genes is triggered by the environment. Okay, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's there, but will the environment awaken it? It's kind of like having a virus, right? We all have cells in our bodies that are capable of being a virus. It only becomes a virus once the environment introduces the virus. It gets activated, it gets triggered within our bodies, and then it does all the things that viruses do. So I feel like that was kind of a better example. Is it something that's already pre-existing, but the environment gives it the exposure that actually activates it, okay, to actually manifest itself. Okay, I'm going to move on. From that and get into common family patterns. Okay, so let's get into some common generational family patterns. I'm going to talk about the different areas, the survival logic that arises from these, and like the consequence, the modern cost of these patterns. Okay, so remember, it's how family responds to stress, money, love, and conflict. So let's talk about emotions, right? So if the pattern is we don't talk about feelings, we don't talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. What happens in a modern cost, like as the family progresses, there is high emotional suppression, and because children and adults learn to keep their emotions to themselves, they become more anxious eventually because they've never released, they've never got to process those emotions properly. Like I grew up with relatives, right? If you fell down, scraped your knee, or got hurt and was crying, I was told, hey, you're not bleeding, you're fine. Are you bleeding? You're okay. Like, suppression. Like, we don't talk about that. You basically, you're crying for no reason. You're not bleeding. There's nothing serious. Let me tell you, okay? Just ruthless. And that emotional suppression, like, you learn to be more reserved with stuff like that. And so, clearly, right, when you have kids, most of the time, or your parents translated that same stuff to you. Like, you're doing too much. It can't hurt that bad. I don't see anything that warrants you to be crying or screaming like that, right? So those are just examples. Another emotion, right? Another emotional response that they pass down, when it pertains to like finances, just work harder, right? So that is something that eventually leads to burnout and a scarcity mindset, right? If you feel like you don't have enough, you will always focus on a lack or the perceived lack, because oftentimes it's not that there's not opportunity for things. It's not that things are missing. It is we actually are not missing these things, like resources and stuff. We are lacking the awareness of what's actually there, because there's plenty that's there. We just don't see it. And we just fixate on what we perceive to be missing at the time. So just work harder. Okay, if we know anything in society, especially with all the changes going on now, right? No matter how hard you work, no matter how long you've been in school, no matter how much debt you went into, it does not guarantee that you get to keep a job. It doesn't guarantee they're going to lay you off. It doesn't even guarantee that you will be able to find one. So if you grew up in a family like that, and part of your identity is stuck on your ability to work hard, and let's say you work hard in all of these things, and nothing is going well for you, right? Where is your ability to think outside of that, right? Look at the families, right, that burn out. They will work the same jobs even though it's destroying their bodies. They won't consider alternatives, because this is what the family has passed down. They only see themselves as a certain kind of worker, a certain kind of status, and all that they do. And clearly, working hard is not bad. And I wouldn't really tell anybody to work hard. I say work smart. Work smart, okay? Especially these days with AI and stuff, you have to learn to work smart. You have to be able to, because AI can, for some of these things, do the hard work. You have to be smart. You have to be smart. You got to know what you know. Um, in the world that is becoming what it is, you know, we have to really have a different approach to things. We have to really be able to adapt in this day and age. And when it comes to relationships, right, the stay no matter what, especially in like certain religious belief systems, right, divorce isn't allowed. How unhealthy is that? How dangerous is that to pass that on for generation after and a generation of repetition, like what that produces, things like that produce. We see the outcomes of that. We hear about it on the news. We see about it on documentaries. When is it gonna end? When is that one person in the family gonna say, this is not right? This needs to stop. This needs to stop, because it's crazy. It's crazy when your family is repeating this pattern and they can acknowledge that it's not right, but nobody wants to change things. That for me, that's why I was always in trouble. That's why I was always in trouble. That's why your girl was always getting my behind toe up from the floor up, because I was always like, why am I in trouble? Because so and so did that. Like, why are you? I was always like, this is not right. And I always got toe up about it, y'all. I was toe up. I was toe up. Okay, I was just, they did not like it. They did not like, and it's not like I just asked questions. I just asked questions. You know, I didn't tell them you're bad, this is wrong, this is bad. I was like, why? They broke it. Why am I receiving the discipline? I'm doing my homework. They in there jumping off the counters, and you come and hit me? Well, I'm just going through the house. You know, last week, you trying to hit me for something that happened over a month ago? You going through the house? I tell you, boy. I tell you. I tell you, but you know, her generation, that's what they did. They just, okay, now everybody. Like, how inappropriate is that? How healthy is that? Like, just how abusive is that? Like, and to let it continue. Like, you knew as a child, you didn't feel that was right, but you gonna repeat it. I don't understand. Help me understand the sense or lack of agency that you have to not reproduce that, especially if it's something you know it's not, it don't even sit right with you, but you do it. I just, it's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, and it's unjust. It's an injustice. It will always be an injustice, and I will never appreciate it. But you know, it's not about me right now. But when families pass down these patterns and religious beliefs of like stay no matter what, and it's not just like in marriages, it's also like a parent dynamic, right? We have adult parents that are still very mentally, emotionally abusive, but they taught us to stay no matter what. You know, it leads to poor boundaries for everybody. You know, like one thing that was very prominent in my household as well was like family doesn't turn on each other, right? And because like family doesn't turn on each other or snitch, right? Like if somebody was breaking the law, we don't call the cops. So even though there was like SA going on, and someone should have just belonged under the jail. No, nobody placed them under the jail, and what happened, right? It continued. Abused their child has now gone to jail for abusing other people's childs, and so on and so forth, all because family doesn't do that to family. Family doesn't hold family accountable. Is what you're really saying. Is what you're really saying. We just let people do whatever they want. They get a pass because they're family. How dangerous is that? Even for children to learn. And we wonder where some of these monsters come from. Like, we cannot believe some of the things that we hear and read about. Well, what do you think you're producing or going to reproduce if those are the patterns that are passed down? If those are the norms that are passed down? If it is normal for every child to experience SA by a cousin or an uncle or an aunt or a family friend, it's normal. It's normal, and you know what's going on, but it's okay because it happened to me. Listen, I'm sorry if this is triggering for any of you. It should be, because it was not okay. It was not okay. And if you were a child, it was not your fault. I need you to know that it was not your fault. I was one of those children. It was not my fault. It wasn't my fault, and it will never be my fault. I don't care who tries to convince me, and they still, into my very well ripe adult age, try to tell me what so-and-so did not do as if they were in the room. Anyways, I digress, okay? But I don't play about that. I don't play about it, and I won't play about it, ever. Because I know the damage such thinking does. In such positions, there are people in their 70s and 80s that still cannot function properly because we don't hold family accountable. I will never have peace for that. I will never make an excuse. I will never make an excuse for it. And you shouldn't either. I don't care. I understand you may feel like you're going to lose loved ones. You may feel like you're going to be rejected and you're going to be abandoned. I've been there. I've done it. I've had the hate. I've had the threats. I've had the abuse. I can list it all. But to know that you chose to stand up for people who couldn't speak for themselves, that gives way more life than they could ever take to just stop it from happening to one additional person. Because it's crazy. It's crazy to me, right? They get older and then they wonder why. Oh, why you don't come over, why we can't do certain things. Why, as an adult, as a grown person, do I want to be around perpetrators? Why would I, on purpose, go put myself? Make that make sense. It doesn't. You can't make it make sense, and it won't. It doesn't. And I'm okay with that. Y'all like that? I don't like that. I don't. Especially if I have children, it is my job as a parent to keep my children safe. And if I'm aware that I have relatives or neighbors or family friends that have even a suspicion, or not even that, but some of y'all know that what so-and-so did to you, you will still allow your children around them because they're family, and oh, it's Christmas and it's Thanksgiving. I'm telling y'all, I'm telling you, you are not crazy. You are not crazy and you are not wrong. If nobody has ever told you, I'm going to tell you, you are not wrong for protecting your children from your family. I know it can be hurtful and you feel lonely sometimes because in your experience, all of that was normal, right? That's where you came from. That's where you're used to. That's what you thought love was. Okay? It is okay to detach and make sure your children are safe. It is okay. They don't need to know anybody that can pose harm to them and develop a relationship with them. Because one thing you cannot handle as a parent is finding out something happened and you put your child in that position. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So let's move along. I'm gonna move along because I know that was a lot, but I want y'all to have that energy. Y'all should have big energy when it comes to protecting your kids, when it comes to protecting any child, when it comes to questioning familial patterns and traditions that are not healthy, that are detrimental. You should want to stand up against it if it's not right, okay? Because that's like one of the things with me is, you know, sometimes I have a couple siblings sometimes that I would talk to here and there, and there was one would be like, oh, I want to give back. If I make this so much money in my business, and the first thing I'm gonna do is give back. And if I could put the meme that I'm thinking of is like this guy, and he was just like, what? Like, but oh my goodness. In my thing, I was like, that is such an error, because like I understand the sentiment, but what do you owe these people? And what do you owe them? They didn't contribute to you building and growing and earning in your business. That was all you. What do you owe them, right? What did you, they never even once provided an apology to you, because they are not sorry. What do you owe these people? What do you have to give back to them that you're indebted to them? It makes no sense. So, and that could also be, you know, a healing point, a journaling point, because there are times where I get sentimental, you know, as a mom, not having a mom there when I'm giving birth. Like it was hard, it was hurtful, because did that have to be the case? No, but that was a decision my biological mother made. She lives her own life. And you know, even as adulthood, there are certain things that I'm deprived of as a result of things, as a result of being the one that says that stops with me. You know, it has its consequences. It has its loneliness about it, but it also has its peace. And because every decision has a consequence, and consequences, they're neutral. They're not good or bad. A consequence is simply what happens after, okay? That is all it is, what happens after. Okay, we assign a meaning to it based off the emotions we attach to the consequence. The consequence itself is just an event, okay? It's a neutral thing. We decide the meaning about it. And so that's a good point. Like if you, because you're gonna get a little sentimental, and some of you may not, but it's just because the whole mental, mind, emotional stuff that you go through when your brain has been rewired, and you live in a world where a mom or a family represents a certain kind of thing, and like consciously you know you have a family because you have had to have a family in order to exist, right? You have to have a mom, you had to have had a dad that created you, to brought you into space, and then you had to have, you know, a grandma, because they also have to have parents. Like you have this conscious knowing of what a family is supposed to be and what it represents, but it's also not anything you identify with, because your reality these individuals were your perpetrators. These individuals were your violators. These individuals were, in fact, not family. You see what I mean? And so it becomes a struggle, right? Not only that, but that longing for, you never cease that love from a parent. It never goes away. But you battle with this. You have so much internal conflict happening on the inside. And it is not, it comes up. And it's not to say it gets harder and gets harder. No, it gets lighter as you grow, as you heal and accept things for what they are. A lot of times we like to be in denial, because denial, it allows us to escape and evade some facts for a little while. The things that we know to be true. It allows us to escape some of these emotions that we don't want to experience because of the truth. It buys us some more time, And for some of us, we just really don't want to be honest. So we'd rather not be. And we'd rather stay there. Alright. Whew, guys. It is what it is, but, these episodes need to happen. Because what do I say? We're here to heal, become, and thrive. We are here to heal from the past. We're not here to explore the past. We're here to recover from the past wholly, fully, so we can live a life unapologetically. Thank you. And we can become who we were meant to be before all of this chaos was thrown and thrusted upon us. But we get to become who we are in addition to everything we are survived, because we are so much stronger. We are so much more valuable, beautiful, and full of worth. We have so much more to offer and so much more to give than we could ever imagine. And we understand now those are the reasons why other people and things try to break us down, because there is something about us that is so powerful. They wanted to cover it up, right? But we made our way out the crab bucket, out the crab pot, okay? We not gonna be Krabby Patties today. And if you guys don't get the metaphors, because when you put crabs in a bucket, right, the ones at the top, they start finding their way out, and the other ones will just yank them on back down. Okay, we all going down. That's the attitudes of crabs, okay? But we ain't doing that here. We finding our ways out the bucket, and and oftentimes we want to bring other people out the bucket too. Sometimes they just don't want to come with us. They would rather us stay down there with them than to go forward and to heal and be whole and enjoy life so we can thrive, because there is peace to be had. We learn how to live in chaos, but we can thrive in the calm, in the peace, in the beauty of life. We can come to a place where life for us become enjoyable. We can enjoy ourselves, our sense of humor, whether people understand it or not. We can embrace us and understand, well, I know why my thoughts can get there, and embrace it. And embrace the fact that we're just simply not normal. And we're never gonna be normal. And that's okay. And that's okay for us. Okay? So let's start talking about how, let me just check my notes really quick. I like to stay on topic as much as I can, because I'm a little bit new. I'm new to this right now. So let's talk about how we can start identifying some of these family patterns. So I hope some of the examples that I gave really pointed, trigger some things in you, some ideas based off some things you see in your family, that came to the forefront of your mind, and I ask you to write them down. So later on, right, you can explore them, and you can try to see how present they are with how you operate your family, or how you live your life, and how present some of these patterns are in you. Okay, so what you can do, right, here's an exercise. All right, and I'm just gonna say bear with me, because I do think, like, going forward, I might come with some more visual aspects in these videos, but in the event that I do not, I will follow up with a blog. The blog that will have, like, pictures and images to help you see what I'm also expressing, because I'm also very, very visual myself. And seeing things help me a lot. So one of the things you can do is you can come up with a map, or you can list out, 3 generations, right? It can, one generation is like your grandparents, the second one you, and the second one your parents, and the third one you, right? So you got your 3 generations, and you can map them out. You could do circles, right? One circle, grandparents, one circle, parents, the next circle, me. And you're gonna note repeating outcomes. Or it doesn't even have to be circles. You could just make a chart, with 3 columns, and just start to list out patterns, right? If it could be health-wise, right? Like high blood pressure, boom, diabetes, anxiety, depressive states. I don't know if I'm gonna say it, but I don't, like suicidal tendencies. You start listing things that you are aware of, right? Babies out of wedlock, married and divorced. You start listing these patterns. Start listing things like incarceration. Like me, I have relatives, right? Multiple baby daddies, multiple baby moms. Broken homes. That's a pattern. Fatherlessness. That's a pattern. You wanna think of things like that. Poverty. Is it reflected in all? Because you get to see it didn't start with you. You see it didn't start with your parents, and likely it didn't start with your grandparents. You get to see these patterns, right? Education, like, did everybody graduate high school? Can people read and write? Like, I'm aware my grandmother, I think, she was like at a 3rd grade reading level. My mom didn't finish school. She didn't get a GED. I have an aunt who's a college graduate, but she's like the exception to the rule. So there's different things of that you want to. She's also been married and divorced multiple times. So, like, you want to identify these patterns, these beliefs. You want to evaluate how much religious beliefs also play a role in these familiar patterns and the consequences of them. Like, is the belief, does religion help the family decide marriage is valuable? And if that was the case, if like religious I'm trying to think of a word, not rights, but religious obedience pertaining to marriage, was that the motivation for them being married? Because back in the day, if people got somebody pregnant, they would just get married. And hopefully we learn now that it's not always the best decision, but some were a little bit more responsible. Like, they were in a relationship, the baby just came sooner than what they wanted. And for some people that works out. For some people it's the worst decision ever. So, right, we start to look at these patterns. We start to see, why do certain people end up in certain situations, right? Like, why was my mom so abusive to me? why was my mom not listening to me? Oh, her mother didn't listen to her. When she was violated, when she was abused, her mom told her it was her fault. So the times where somebody violated me and I came and told my mom, she told me I didn't know what I was talking about. Like the dismissiveness to safety in dangerous situations being dismissed, because you start to see, you start to understand a little better. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right ever. It never will. But you start to see where it comes from, right? And you can see, like, you very much have the genes, you have the genetic makeup to produce that same stuff. And maybe to some degree, you have at this, up until this point. But now that you're seeing it, you're learning, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want to repeat this. I don't want my children to repeat this. You can start to see the things that you can do something about, right? And not just say, I'm not going to do this. Like, no, replace behaviors, okay? So, for example, for me, right, I saw this pattern of this multiple baby daddy things. Now, in my particular situation, I have 7 maternal siblings, and there are at least 4 different dads involved, at least, not to mention all the ones who could be dads. I had to deal with all that as a child. It was a complete identity mess. But I saw that, and I knew as a child, like, that is not going to be me. And instead of, right, what leads to children in by multiple fathers, right? That comes from being sexually active with multiple partners, right? Every time you do that, yeah, and I'm not gonna get into protection, and I'm not gonna get into all that, and that's how, people get pregnant and babies come, okay? And I'm not someone who is necessarily, or in my family, I would say they all, and I'm not saying I'm for or against, but I'm definitely not for. But just in the essence of talking about generational patterns, there's a clear indicator and belief system and pattern that they do not value abortion, which is evidenced by all of these children being born out of wedlock by men, and some of them don't even know who the father is, okay? They never done it. And so, okay, with that being an example and that being a pattern, but for me, I just decided I wasn't going to be engaged in any activity like that had the potential for me to kept my legs closed. It wasn't worth the risk to me. It's not something I valued. It's not something I thought was cute. I was embarrassed by it. I was ashamed. I was ashamed for my mother, who thought it was cute to be in the welfare office being asked, listing out all of these kids, and then when asking who the father is, like, oh, and like, read the room. Why are you smiling and chuckling? Like, I'm sitting here trying to get under the chair because I'm like 12, 13 years old. I can't handle this. This is not cute. It's not cute. I understand, like, things in life happen, but at some point, you have to learn. You just have to learn. And she just wasn't, and she wasn't learning, and she was okay with what that does to children. She was okay with not knowing who their father was. And it's no judgment to her, because it's annoying, because how that is not one thing I think you should be proud of. At least, especially not back in the day. We live in a different society, and people are gonna feel some kind of way. But I understand how that kind of came about for her, because how her mother was and what patterns they passed down. Okay, her mother was married multiple times, divorced multiple times. So the principle of it, children of multiple fathers, is not a bad thing. It just seemed more appropriate because there were marriages with her mother. Well, when it came to her, there were not marriages involved. But it was still okay, because the other rule wasn't broken, which of abortion. So it's very complex, some of these patterns. And then it was clearly okay for the males of the family to not commit to a woman and continue to reproduce children and not be fathers. Like, that was not a requirement for the males. And so, oh my goodness, just a mess. Just a mess. Just a mess. Because families are suffering. Families are suffering because of these patterns. Because of these patterns, right? It's challenging. Let's say you do decide, especially as a father, my father wasn't there, but I'm gonna be a father. It's hard to do, because if you're raised by a woman and you don't really have male role models in your life, it's what your perception of a father and a man, you're almost kind of grasping at straws. A lot of your fatherhood is based off of your mom, your experience with your mom. In music, what you see in media, things are easily, and if out in the streets, what's out in the streets, and in being African American, rap culture, that is what fatherhood looks like. And some women also, anyways, let me not get into all that, because that's not really the thing. But same as a mother, like the patterns that were passed down to me, like, yes, sometimes because my nervous system is out of whack, right, I'm not always so emotionally available to my children, and not even that I'm also not emotionally available, like I am aware of the emotion, but because of like the conditioning that I was under in the attachments, right, right, if you're not bleeding, you're fine, a lot of emotion was suppressed, so a lot of things I don't show, but I sense it, I understand. But you're not likely to see me like welting and weeping with you. You're likely to see me quiet, neutral in the face, but I am holding you and I'm telling you you're okay. Because that's just not how my nervous system responds. And it's still okay, it's still an appropriate response. But for other people on the outside, right, they would think like, oh no, she's like not responding, right? She's probably, and like trying to make me feel some kind of way by me not being reactive, because you are all of this. And I have a good example. Fairly recently, my child is in like this recreational activity, and her sister is there as well. Now, I usually would have like a water bottle or something. I didn't bring one this day, and I think it was like a very just overstimulating day for me. So I walked to my car for a little bit. My car is right in front of the activity, so I can see what's going on from my car. And my oldest daughter knows I'm right here. I'm in the front, and I might be in the car because I'm gonna do some reading. I'm gonna do, some distress while I got a moment. And on my way out of my car, I'm like, okay, let me go enjoy, which I wasn't in there the whole time. But the last few minutes of it, I was like, okay, let me go enjoy, let me go see like the progress my baby girl is making. And as I'm walking, some other parents that are also out and about watching their kids, they tell me, oh yeah, some lady, she's over there like talking to your other daughter right now because your baby girl had got out. And so I walk into a situation, and not only that, right, I'm aware of the situation, but I've also have worked in de-escalation for several years. So when other people are freaking out, I have a very strong ability to remain calm. And not only, it's not just that kind of training, but it's also part of the conditioning that I had as a child. I was never one of those children that was on the floor. I don't care how angry I was, like, it never came out of me. It all stayed within. So, anyways, I go, address my oldest daughter. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Because I don't understand. But this lady is, just right here watching around. And I asked her, like, the first thing I asked my daughter, I was like, what happened? Like, how did your sister get out of the, whatever they're saying? How did she get out? How did she, because there's 4 adults in her activity. How did she get past 4 adults? Like, I'm being told she got past all these adults and went to a different space. So I'm trying to figure out, and this lady just projects, oh no, she is a child, you're the adult, it is not her. So trying to, because she is experiencing this anxiety, but she's also in her fight mode, because she in her mind, something very dangerous has happened, and so she's expecting me to be highly elevated. She's expecting me to match her anxious, frightened energy, and I'm not. I'm very calm approaching the situation because I need all the facts, because you're communicating something to me that is not what I see. I see my child in her class. These parents are not telling me anything dangerous or something happened, but yet you are trying to convince me that all of this took place, that my daughter was running towards the street. And so, anyways, right? So, because I was still calm, like, I felt she kept trying to convince my other daughter it's not her fault, and like, trying to tell me you're not, like, first of all, I didn't blame my child. I asked the question. I'm not telling my child it's her fault. You are trying to put that in her head. None of that's been said here. And I mean, the lady was doing a lot. She was hugging my daughter. She was just doing just very inappropriate, very unprofessional. And not only that, but she was just completely out of order. Like, my daughter has a shirt that says where she's on, literally next door. My daughter walked over there to get some water, but this lady didn't know her coach took her over there. And so she's causing this scene, like, it's my fault. When I left my, child with her coaches. And anyways, this lady's like talking to me like I'm this bad parent, and she's looking, because I'm calm, she's getting more irate in her mind, like, how unbelievable that this parent's daughter was in danger and she doesn't even care, because of how calm I am. That is how this lady was, further projecting onto me. And I just wasn't for it. I got the facts. I did my own investigation. And she was just, and so I say that to say, people can misread things very often, and it's even when we're in survival mode, right? And it can also be a pattern. In survival mode, how often does this hyper independence look like you have it all together? It looks like you're healthy and well, when really you are in survival mode, and you're a ticking time bomb. And at any point in time, it's gonna, you got one more thing that is gonna set you off. But you look so well put together in everybody else's eyes. Or you look so calm while everybody else is freaking out. Those are also patterns there are also responses. There are some things that can happen. The secrecy, the silence. Like, one thing I really hated growing up, was finding out the things that happened that they knew about, and it was so then why did it have to happen? That was so frustrating. And I know I went on a little rant, but let me move forward, because wow, here we are. So you can identify those patterns like that. Make some columns. Give yourself 3 columns. Start with grandparents, start with your parents, and start with yourself. Start identifying the patterns, and then not only that, but I want you on a separate piece of paper to implement, like, I see this pattern, this stops with me, and this is what we're going to do instead. Like, instead of self-medicating, we're going to heal. We're not going to deflect. We're not going to numb the pain. We're going to come head on, and we're going to figure out what's causing this, and we're going to deal with it, so we don't have to deal with it anymore. And my children won't have to deal with it, and it can stop happening. It stops here. I want you to do that, because we want to make progress. We want to be stuck here. We want to make progress. Okay? We're using the past as a learning experience. It's something to reference to move forward. Okay? Just like we learned from history, so we don't repeat it. That's the same thing along your healing journey. And how do we detox from this dysfunction? Okay? Again, first thing, we gotta be aware. We gotta be aware of what the dysfunction is. We gotta be aware of what these patterns are, okay? And we gotta name it, right? Even if it's just one word: secrecy, silence, abuse, mental, emotional. Name it, label it, identify it. If it takes a sentence to describe, take the sentence to describe it, okay? Then step 2, after the awareness, you want to educate yourself on it, okay? You want to learn alternative behaviors to that, right? Emotional coping, secrecy, addiction, things about money. You want to learn alternative patterns, right? If you grew up in poverty, what can I do to get us out of it? What can I do to not think that, or repeat the cycle of having more children just to receive benefits? Because I see that pattern. How can I position myself and my family to no longer be recipients, right? Like, maybe I need it temporarily, but how and what can I do to put my children in a position where they don't think this is normal, and so they won't want to do it, right? Start thinking about things of that nature. And in step 3, you want to experiment with the new behaviors. You want to figure out what works for you, what's comfortable for you, and what helps you, especially when it comes to regulating stress. So if you watch the previous episodes, I talk a lot about the childhood and attachments and things that follow us into adulthood because of not being able to regulate stress and not having an adult or a caregiver help us regulate that, the consequences of that throughout our lives. So I encourage you to watch the previous episode. And the 4th thing, like, after you're experimenting, finding out what works for you, finding out what helps you regulate yourself, finding out what's going to work for your family as well, and these replacement behaviors, things you identify with, things that suit you. The last thing you want to do in all this process, because some of it's going to be happening simultaneously, it's not necessarily all of it going to be cyclical, because you're going to start becoming aware of different things as you're educating yourself, okay? And as you're experimenting, right? So it's all going to be happening at the same time. And at the same time, you want to extend grace to yourself. That is the best form of self-love that you can do at this time, because other people, they're not going to give it to you. They're not applauding you for healing, for addressing things that need to stop, for stopping the pain, creating your own prescriptions, okay? They're not going to applaud you for that, but you can find people who will, like people like me, because I understand, and oftentimes where you desire that love and support to come from, you often don't get it. So extend that grace to yourself, because you got to remember that all dysfunction was, at some point, especially in your life, was a form of adaptation. And we can extend that grace to some of our relatives, but again, if they're not a safe place for you, stay away. Don't do that to your nervous system. You're trying to heal. You are not trying to set it off. Okay? And just behaviorally, as you're going on this path, this journey, you want to, right? You want to get a cue, you want to get a routine, and you want to reward yourself to sustain these new patterns you're creating for your family. So, like, for every time, even if something your child did was upsetting to you, right? That's the cue. Your child did something they probably shouldn't have done. They didn't listen. They were disobedient. But you remain calm, and you calmly handle the situation, right? That you want to get in the routine of responding in a calm, self-controlled, regulated manner when addressing your child's behavior, especially when that's not what you came from, right? And then you want to reward yourself, right? What is going to be the reward? Start figuring out. It can be a spa time or different things like that. It could just be positive self-talk as well. Praising yourself. Walk away. I did that, right? Like, normally I would have tore his little behind up, but you know what? I ain't have to hurt myself trying to spank him. And I felt good. I didn't have to get out of character. I didn't have to do none of that. I'm good. I'm going to have some ice cream or something. Should feel good about it. It's growth. It is something that at some point you didn't even think was possible to do, but now that you experienced it, it's good. It's good for you to have, and it's going to continue to build upon, because that's the behavior you want to continue to see within yourself. So every time you engage in that behavior, that pattern, you want to reward it, you want to acknowledge it, so you can continue to do it, and it'll create, because you're producing safety in the home, right? You're producing safety through language. You're producing, right? Your child is going to start to see, I messed up, and it's safe. Like, mom is not going to hurt me because I made a mistake. So good. So good. And a good book to read is Atomic Habits as well. That talks a little bit more about, addressing these patterns and just understanding how behavior works, how it's maintained. But, I just encourage that if you are a parent, or even if, like, you cue, like, something happened that maybe kind of fell through, and then you notice, like, your self-talk is negative, just redirecting it to some positive, something neutral, and rewarding that however you want to do it. It's going to be good. And to bring this to a close, oh my goodness, I don't know, the time just flew by with this one. But to bring this to a close, I want you to reflect, this week on what family rule or rules have kept you safe, but it limits you now. And reflect on it, because it may not necessarily be a real safety. I know for me, when we grew up in a very just abusive, neglective, unhealthy home, and oftentimes, like, child protective services and things of that nature were called, right? And we were taught that, they wanted to separate us. They wanted to destroy our family. And so the rule was basically to lie, to protect your family from these people that wanted to destroy the family. And so in my mind, or at the time, right, that rule was keeping us safe. But it was a limitation, right? It was a limitation, because it wasn't keeping the children safe. It was keeping the adults safe from accountability, while the children continued to suffer. So I also want you to consider that as well, because some of the things that we thought were safe were not actually safe. So we have to think on that. And then I want you to journal or voice note these things so you can begin to process some of these feelings and emotions, and encourage compassion for yourself, again, grace, and understand that the need to survive was kind of passed down to you, and you will adapt through the rewiring stuff of your brain. But now we're recovering, we're becoming whole, and understand, I'm gonna leave you with this. We can honor our families, no matter how dysfunctional and things that they were, by rewriting the patterns, and not repeating their pain, but rewriting the patterns. So that is how we can honor our families, right? Again, I'm gonna repeat it one last time because I actually like that. We can honor our families, okay? That doesn't mean we need to maintain contact and different things. To each situation requires the different responses. So everything's not black and white, but you can still honor your family by not repeating the pain, right? Stopping it, nipping it in the bud, and creating new patterns to pass on, Yes. And that's all I have for you. Thank you for joining the Chrysalis Room, episode 5, where we heal, become, and thrive.